I can help. The words didn't belong in that room. They didn't belong under the glass chandelier that threw cold light across a table long enough to look like it had its own zip code. They didn't belong between the polished water pitchers and the framed skyline photograph that made New York look like a promise instead of a test. I can help, the girl repeated, small hands held close to her chest, as if she could keep her heartbeat from spilling out. Across the table, Vivian Sterling, CEO of Sterling & Co. Holdings, didn't move. She didn't blink the way people did when they were trying to wake up from a mistake. She didn't let her face show the embarrassment of the moment, because in Vivian's world, embarrassment was a luxury. At Vivian's side, Marla Griggs let out a laugh so sharp it could cut glass. "This is..." Marla shook her head, eyes sweeping over the child like lint on a suit. "This is a joke. Somebody's kid wandered in. Security." But Vivian raised one finger. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a single, quiet command in the language of power. And the room executive's assistants, even the trembling door handle, obeyed. The girl stood there in a faded navy hoodie that was two big sleeves swallowing her wrists. Her shoes were scuffed. Her hair was pulled back tight, neat in a way that wasn't fashion but survival. Her skin was deep brown, and her eyes were steady, like she'd been looking up at tall buildings her entire life and learned not to flinch. Vivian watched those eyes for one long second. Then she said, calm as closing a deal, "What's your name?" The girl swallowed. "Amina. Amina Carter." Marla scoffed. "Vivian, we have Mr. Watanabe arriving in Aino," Vivian said softly without looking at her. Marla froze. Because Vivian's softness wasn't kindness, it was precision. Vivian's gaze returned to Amina. "You said you can help." With what exactly? Amina's voice came out small, but it didn't shake. "With Japanese. The interpreter got hurt." "I heard you." Silence hit the room like a door closing. Somewhere outside, an elevator chimed. Somewhere lower in the building, a cleaning machine hummed a distant VRRR that sounded like a planet turning. Vivian's assistant, a young man with a tablet and panic in his throat, whispered, "Miss Sterling, the contracted interpreter, was in an accident. EMT confirmed she won't make it. We've called 3 agencies. No one can get here in time." Marla leaned in, smiling as if she'd been waiting for this moment all week. "We should reschedule." "That's the only rational no," Vivian said. The word was gentle. The room went colder. Vivian's eyes stayed on Amina. "If you're wrong," she said, "this meeting will collapse. We will lose months of work. People will lose their jobs." Amina nodded once, like she understood that weight in her bones. "I know," she said. Marla's laugh burst out again, louder, crueler. "You know, sweetheart, you don't even know where you are." Amina's cheeks flushed, anger and embarrassment fighting for space, but she didn't look away. Because she'd been laughed at before. Because she'd watched her mother swallow worse. Vivian studied her. Not like a child. Like a person. Then Vivian said one sentence in Japanese, measured, formal, the kind of phrase used when you were asking someone to step into a room and prove who they are. "Dewa shashi washite mimashou." "All right then, let's speak for a moment." Amina blinked just once. Then she answered in Japanese, clear and clean. "Hi. Surely shimasu. Huo yusebai desu ka?" "Yes." "Excuse me, what would you like me to interpret?" The assistant's mouth fell open. Marla's smile cracked. Vivian's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion but in something rarer. Recognition. And just like that, the room tilted. Because the smallest voice had spoken and the building had listened. Vivian nodded barely. "Good." She slid a notepad toward Amina. On the page were bullet points, key clauses, phrases that could make or break a partnership. Vivian's voice lowered just for her. "Then you'll stand beside me. And you'll help." Amina's throat tightened. "Okay." And in that moment, before the Japanese delegation arrived, before signatures and consequences, Amina didn't know she was about to change her mother's life. To understand how a 9-year-old ended up on the CEO floor of Sterling & Co., you have to go back to the morning when everything still looked ordinary. The morning that smelled like lemon cleaner and cold winter air. The morning Amina walked into a glass building with a mop bucket shadowing her like a second sun. The day began the way most days began for Keisha Carter. Too early. The city outside their apartment window was still half-asleep streetlights, blinking like tired eyes. In their tiny room, the radiator clicked and hissed like it was thinking about giving up. Amina sat cross-legged on the mattress, pulling on socks that didn't match. She didn't complain. Complaining was something you did when you believed the world might answer. Keisha tied her hair back, fingers fast. Her uniform navy pants plain shirt was folded over a chair, the fabric worn thin at the elbows. Amina watched her mother the way kids watch heroes when they're too young to call them that. "Mom," Amina said quietly, "do I have to come with you?" Keisha paused, her smile tired but warm. "Just today." Amina understood what just today meant. It meant their neighbor who sometimes watched her had started an early shift. It meant the daycare vouchers hadn't come through. It meant being alone in a building with strangers was safer than being alone in the apartment with the broken lock. Keisha cupped Amina's face in both hands. "You stay near me," she said. "If you have to use the bathroom, you tell me. If you feel hungry, you tell me. If anyone says anything to you, I tell you," Amina finished. Keisha smiled like she was proud and heartbroken at the same time. Then, as Keisha grabbed her keys, Amina heard it soft, almost accidental, a string of Japanese under her mother's breath. Not the kind you heard on TV. Not the stiff textbook phrases. It was fluid. Familiar, like a song. Amina's eyes lit up. "Say it again." Keisha froze as if she'd been caught holding something fragile. "What?" she asked. "The Japanese," Amina said. "It sounds like you're not even thinking." Keisha looked away. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," Amina insisted. "You're really good." Keisha's face tightened. She opened the door. "We're late," she said, voice gentle but final. Amina slid off the mattress and followed. Outside, winter bit at their cheeks. The sidewalks were slick. People in suits moved fast, like their time was worth more than other people's time. Keisha walked with her shoulders slightly hunched, an old habit of trying to take up less space. At the subway entrance, Amina glanced up at her mother. "Why don't you talk Japanese at work?" Keisha's grip on her hand tightened. "Because she said some gifts are safer when they're hidden." Amina didn't like that answer. It tasted like sadness, but the train came and the question got swallowed by noise. Sterling & Co. Holdings rose from Midtown like a monument to money. Glass, steel, marble lobby floors so shiny they reflected your shoes and sometimes your self-worth. Amina had been here before, but she still felt smaller every time they stepped inside. The lobby smelled like expensive coffee and perfume and something else, sterility, as if mistakes couldn't survive in the air. Keisha signed in. She clipped her badge to her shirt. Amina watched the badge swing, watched the words printed under her mother's name. Facilities. Not interpreter. Not languages. Not client relations. Facilities. Keisha pushed a cart with supplies, rags folded neatly, spray bottles, gloves, trash bags. A mop bucket trailed behind with a bright blue tag attached to its handle, standard issue numbered, labeled, like everything in the building needed to be owned. Amina followed, careful not to step too far from her mother's shadow. They took the staff elevator, less polished, more functional. The walls were scratched. The air smelled faintly like cleaning products and old metal. On the way up, they stopped on a mid-level floor. Keisha began wiping down a corridor, her motions practiced. She moved like she was trying not to make noise, not to disturb the expensive quiet. Amina sat on a bench near a window, hugging her backpack. Down the hall, a group of employees in crisp clothes passed by. One of them glanced at Amina, then at Keisha, then looked away like they hadn't seen anything at all. Amina hated that. She hated the way invisibility felt like a decision someone else made for you. As Keisha worked, she hummed under her breath, just a low melody, something that sounded like home. Every now and then, Japanese slipped out with the hum, small phrases like secrets. Amina listened, heart full of questions. And then Keisha. The voice cut through the corridor like a blade. Keisha stiffened. Amina turned. Marla Griggs stood at the far end of the hall with a clipboard, dressed in a tailored blazer that made her look like she belonged to the building itself. Marla's smile wasn't friendly. It was the kind you wore when you wanted to remind someone they were beneath you. "Your schedule changed," Marla said. "You're assigned to the executive floor today." Keisha's eyes flicked up, alarm flashing across her face. Executive floor, I wasn't. Marla stepped closer. Don't question your assignment. I'm just saying, Keisha started. Marla's gaze dropped to Amina. And what is that doing here? Amina's cheeks burned. She stood up, small but straight. My daughter, Keisha said quickly. I had no one to watch her. I can keep her with me. She won't. What breathed Marla's voice carried a soft contempt. This is a professional environment, Keisha. If you can't handle professional, I can handle it, Keisha said too fast. Marla smiled, satisfied. Good. Then she leaned closer, lowering her voice like a friend sharing advice. And Keisha, no extra performances today. Just do your job. Keisha's face went still. Amina didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Marla walked away, heels clicking like punctuation. Amina watched her go, fists tight. Mom, Amina whispered. What did she mean? Keisha exhaled long and slow. Nothing you need to worry about. But Amina saw it, the way her mother's shoulders sagged after Marla left, like the air itself got heavier. And for the first time, Amina felt something inside her shift. Not fear, not confusion. Something sharper. Something that sounded like, this isn't fair. The executive floor was different. Even the elevator felt different. They had to ride a separate one, sleeker, quieter. Keisha held her badge to a scanner, and the machine beeped with reluctant permission. Amina looked at the buttons. Most floors had numbers. This one had a letter. E. Amina's stomach fluttered. As the elevator rose, the hum of the building changed. The air seemed cleaner, the silence thicker. When the doors opened, Amina stepped out and felt like she'd walked into another world. The carpet was so soft it swallowed footsteps. The walls were lined with abstract art shapes and colors that didn't mean anything to her but probably cost more than their rent. Keisha whispered, "Stay close." Amina nodded. They moved down the hall toward a supply closet. Keisha set her cart in place, checked her list. Amina sat on the floor beside the mop bucket, tracing the blue tag with her finger. She listened. The executive floor had its own sounds, soft murmurs behind closed doors, the distant clink of glass, the faint ding of email notifications, like tiny alarms. And beneath all of it, the building's heartbeat, air vents, whispering, fluorescent lights humming. Keisha worked fast, wiping, emptying, straightening. Amina watched her mother's hands, quick, careful, invisible. Then Amina's stomach growled loud enough to make her flinch. Keisha glanced down and softened. "You okay?" Amina nodded. "Just hungry." Keisha smiled apologetically, digging into her pocket and pulling out a granola bar, slightly crushed, wrapper wrinkled. Amina took it, grateful. While she ate, she watched the hallway. She watched the way people in suits walked like they owned the air. She watched the way they didn't look at Keisha. And then she saw a door. It wasn't marked like the others. No department label. No name. Just a silver plate and a sensor. Amina stared. Something about that door pulled at her, like a story waiting behind it. She stood, taking one slow step toward it. Keisha didn't notice. She was bent over a trash bin, replacing liners. Amina took another step, a third. The carpet muffled her approach, turning her into a ghost in her own life. She reached the door. The sensor light blinked. Amina leaned closer, pressing her ear lightly to the cool surface. And then she heard voices. One was a woman's, low, controlled, but threaded with urgency. "That can't be right," the voice said. The interpreter was confirmed for today. Another voice, an assistant, nervous. "We just got word. She was in a car accident this morning. Non-life-threatening, but she's hospitalized. She won't be able to." Amina's breath caught. The first voice, smooth, sharp, exhaled. "We can't do this meeting without a translator. Watanabe's team will take it as disrespect. We're trying agencies," the assistant said. "But, hey, pause. Heavy. We don't have time," the woman said. Amina didn't know who Watanabe was, but she knew what no time sounded like. It sounded like her mother counting pennies. It sounded like rent notices. It sounded like a door closing. Amina's hand lifted. She didn't plan it. She didn't rehearse it. She just knocked. One small knock in a world built to ignore small things. Silence. Then, the door opened, and Amina Carter stepped into the brightest room she'd ever seen. The room was a conference suite, clean lines, cold light, a wall of windows that showed Manhattan like a trophy. At the head of the table stood Vivian Sterling. Amina recognized her immediately. Even if you didn't know her face, you could feel her. Vivian had the kind of presence that made adults straighten their backs. Her hair was pulled into a sleek twist. Her suit was charcoal perfect, tailored like armor. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were stormy, focused on the problem in front of her. Beside her, holding a tablet with shaking fingers, was an assistant, and near the door, too close, stood Marla Griggs. Marla's face shifted when she saw Amina like disgust turning into opportunity. "What is this?" Marla snapped. "How did you get up here?" Amina's mouth went dry. She felt every inch of her hoodie, every scuff on her shoes. I was with my mom," she said. "I heard you talking." Marla's lips curled. "Of course you were. Because staff can't follow basic rules." Amina's eyes flicked to Vivian. Vivian didn't look angry at Amina. She looked curious. "What did you hear?" Vivian asked. Amina swallowed. "Your interpreter got hurt. You need someone to translate for Japanese." Marla laughed. "Oh, this is adorable. A child thinks she can." Amina's voice rose sharper than she meant it to. "I can help." Marla's laughter turned colder. "Honey, you can barely help yourself." The words hit Amina's chest like a shove. She forced herself not to blink, not to cry, not to do the thing people expected from a little girl being humiliated. She looked at Vivian instead, and in that gaze was something that didn't ask for permission. Vivian's assistant whispered, "Miss." Sterling Security. Vivian lifted her hand. Marla's smile widened, convinced she'd won. But Vivian didn't call security. Vivian stepped closer to Amina, stopping just a few feet away. Not looming, not soft, just present. "You speak Japanese?" Vivian asked. Amina nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Marla sighed, dramatically. "Vivian, we're burning time." Vivian didn't look at her. Vivian spoke one sentence in Japanese, crisp and formal, testing, not cruel. Amina answered, equally formal. Then Vivian changed the question, using a phrase more nuanced, the kind that required understanding tone, not just vocabulary. Amina answered again. Marla's face twitched. Vivian's eyes narrowed as if the world had just revealed a hidden door. "Who taught you?" Vivian asked. Amina hesitated. "My mom. She's really good. She talks Japanese when she thinks nobody is listening." That sentence landed quietly, like a truth walking into the room without knocking. Vivian's gaze shifted past Amina toward the hallway, toward the invisible workers who kept this place shining. Marla rushed in. "If she's so good, why is she cleaning floors?" "Exactly. Because she isn't." Vivian's voice stayed calm. "Enough, Marla." The room held its breath. Vivian turned back to Amina. "This meeting is high stakes," she said. "If you miss meaning, if you mistranslate even by accident, it could cost us everything." Amina nodded. "I know." Vivian watched her for a moment. Then she nodded, once decisive. "Okay," Vivian said. "You'll interpret." Marla's mouth fell open. "Vivian." Vivian's gaze finally snapped to Marla. Marla went silent. Because that was Vivian's real power. Not volume. Not anger. Precision. Vivian looked back at Amina. "Stand beside me," she said, "and breathe." Amina did. And as she stepped toward the table, she felt something inside her settle. Not confidence. Not arrogance. Something simpler. A promise to her mother. A promise to herself. "I won't let them laugh at us today." The Japanese delegation arrived 5 minutes later. 4 people in dark suits. Their movements were polite, controlled. Their faces neutral in the way that didn't mean emptiness, it meant discipline. At the front was Kenji Watanabe. He wasn't loud. He didn't need to be. His eyes scanned the room the way a judge scans a courtroom. Vivian stood to greet them, her smile measured. "Mr. Watanabe," she said, extending her hand. Watanabe shook her hand with a slight bow, then looked around as if confirming the scene matched his expectations. His gaze landed on Amina. It paused, just long enough for Amina's throat to tighten. Children didn't belong in rooms like this. Amina could feel Marla's smugness radiating from the side like heat. Vivian gestured. "This is Amina Carter. She'll be assisting with interpretation today." Marla's breath caught. Watanabe's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. He said something in Japanese, slow, careful. Amina translated a loud voice steady. "Mr. Watanabe says he appreciates the welcome. He's surprised by the arrangement and hopes there will be full clarity in communication." Vivian's head tilted slightly, acknowledging. She answered, and Amina translated back into Japanese with respect, choosing honorifics matching the formality of business culture. Watanabe listened. Then he spoke again, faster, now testing not just comprehension but competence. Amina's palms dampened, but she kept her face calm. She translated, "He says time is valuable. He wants to confirm whether today's agenda will proceed as planned, including the risk disclosures and the long-term partnership terms." Vivian glanced at her, a flicker of approval in her eyes. The meeting began. Numbers appeared on screens. Graphs and projections. The language of adults trying to predict the future. At first, Amina stayed close to Vivian's side, translating sentence by sentence, careful not to stumble. But then the conversation shifted. Watanabe asked a question that wasn't just a question. It had edges. He said something in Japanese that, if translated too literally, would sound rude, but in his tone it was a cultural pressure, a way of measuring strength without direct confrontation. Amina felt her stomach twist. She took half a breath, and instead of translating word for word, she translated meaning. "Mr. Watanabe is asking for assurance that Sterling & Co. values long-term trust over short-term gain," Amina said. "He's saying partnerships are built slowly, and he's concerned about volatility." Vivian paused, impressed. Marla's jaw tightened. Vivian answered with a measured statement about transparency and stability. Amina translated back, choosing words in Japanese that carried humility and commitment instead of arrogance. Watanabe's shoulders relaxed barely, but enough. The meeting continued. An hour passed. Then came the clause. The one everyone knew could explode. Vivian referenced a contingency plan, a legal mechanism to protect Sterling & Co. if the market shifted. Watanabe's expression darkened. He spoke sharply. Amina felt the room tighten. Marla leaned in, whispering under her breath, "This is where we lose him." But Amina listened, not just to words, but to the space between them. Watanabe wasn't angry at the clause. He was angry at the implication that Sterling & Co. didn't trust him. Amina translated carefully, "Mr. Watanabe understands the need for protection, but he feels this clause suggests Sterling & Co. expects failure. He wants to know whether you believe in this partnership." Vivian's eyes flickered. That was the real question. Vivian straightened. "Tell him," she said, voice low, "we believe in it. That's why we're here." Amina translated. But she added one nuance, one cultural bridge. In Japanese, she chose phrasing that carried honor and sincerity without desperation. Watanabe listened. His face softened just slightly. Then he said something else quieter. Amina translated. "He says he appreciates the honesty. And he respects that you didn't hide the risks. He believes that shows strength." Marla's face went pale, because she realized in that moment that the child she'd laughed at was saving the company. The rest of the meeting moved, like a river finally finding its channel. The negotiation ended with a handshake. Watanabe signed. Vivian signed. Pens scratched paper like fate being written. When it was over, Watanabe stood, bowed slightly to Vivian, then looked at Amina. He spoke in Japanese, gentler now. Amina translated, voice softer. "He says you have a rare skill. Not just language, but respect." Amina's throat tightened. She bowed the way her mother had taught her. Watanabe left. The door closed, and for 1 second the room was silent. Then Vivian exhaled, long and controlled. She turned to Amina. You did well, Vivian said. Amina nodded, but her eyes were already searching the hallway. Because the only praise she wanted wasn't in this room. It was the kind she could bring back to her mother, like a light in a dark apartment. Like proof, Vivian didn't celebrate. That was the thing about people like Vivian Sterling, they didn't drink success like champagne. They treated it like oxygen, necessary, expected, invisible. Instead, Vivian stood at the window looking out at the city like she was measuring its weight. Behind her, Marla cleared her throat. Vivian, I need to say Vivian didn't turn. Don't. Marla swallowed. We got lucky. Vivian's voice was calm. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Marla bristled. Are you implying I wasn't prepared? Vivian finally turned. Her eyes were cold enough to stop arguments mid-sentence. I'm implying Vivian said that a 9-year-old just performed a role we pay professionals to perform, and she learned it from someone on your payroll. Marla's smile tried to return. Keisha, Vivian, she's a cleaner. Vivian walked to her desk and tapped her laptop. We'll see. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She pulled up internal records, employee files, performance reports, schedule assignments. Within minutes, patterns appeared like stains under UV light. Keisha Carter hired 3 years ago. Originally applied for client support, language liaison Japanese. Her resume attached, certifications, community college transcripts, volunteer interpreting work, a letter of recommendation from a nonprofit that helped immigrant families with legal translation. Then, a note. Not a fit for client-facing role. Reassigned to facilities. The note was signed by Marla Griggs. Vivian's jaw tightened. Marla's fingers curled around her clipboard. That was a staffing decision. Vivian clicked into schedule logs. Keisha's shifts had been rearranged, repeatedly moved away from client floors, placed on late nights, then early mornings, then executive floors with impossible timing. 1,000 small ways to make someone fail. Vivian looked at Marla. Why? Marla's eyes darted. Vivian, it's complicated. Vivian leaned forward slightly, voice quiet. Explain it, she said. Marla's mask slipped. Just a fraction. She made other people uncomfortable, Marla said quickly. She spoke Japanese in the break room once. People thought she was talking about them. She has a presence. And you know clients. They expect a certain. Vivian's eyes narrowed. A certain what Marla hesitated. And in that hesitation was the truth. Vivian straightened. Get out, Vivian said. Marla blinked. Vivian out. Vivian repeated. Marla left, heels clicking fast, now no longer confident but scrambling. Vivian sat back, breathing slowly, as if keeping herself from punching a wall made of glass. Then she called her assistant. Bring Keisha Carter to my office, Vivian said. And bring Amina. The assistant nodded and rushed out. Vivian looked down at the blue tag number in the facility's roster. A blue tag. A label. A way of saying, this is where you belong. Vivian's eyes hardened. No, she whispered. Not anymore. Keisha arrived 10 minutes later, hands still faintly smelling of cleaner uniform, crisp but worn. Amina walked beside her, eyes wide. Keisha's gaze flicked around Vivian's office, massive, spotless, intimidating. She stood stiff as if bracing for impact. Miss Sterling, Keisha said carefully. Is something wrong? Vivian gestured to a chair. Please sit. Keisha didn't sit right away. She looked at Amina. Amina stayed close to her mother's side fingers, hooking into Keisha's sleeve. Vivian watched that how the mother's body shielded the child automatically, even in a room where there was no physical danger. Vivian softened her voice. Amina helped us today, she said. Keisha's eyes widened. Helped you, Amina? What did you do? Amina's chin lifted. I translated. Keisha's face drained of color. No, she whispered. Amina, you can't. Vivian raised her hand gently. She did it well. Keisha looked like she didn't know whether to cry or apologize. I'm sorry, Keisha said quickly. I didn't mean for her to. I tried to keep her close. Vivian's gaze held hers. You taught her Japanese. Keisha froze. Silence stretched. In that silence, Keisha's shoulders sagged a fraction, like she'd been carrying a secret too heavy for too long. I know. Some, Keisha said quietly. Vivian leaned forward. Keisha, your file says you applied for a language liaison role. Keisha's eyes flickered. She didn't deny it. Vivian continued calm but unwavering. It also says you were reassigned by Marla Griggs. Keisha's hands trembled. She clasped them together to hide it. I needed the job, Keisha said, voice thin. So I did what they told me. Amina's eyes flashed. Mom, you're really good. Why did you let her? Keisha flinched. Amina Vivian spoke softly. Why did you let them hide you? Keisha swallowed. Then, so quietly it almost didn't exist, she said, because sometimes the world punishes you for being good at something it doesn't want from you. Amina stared at her mother, heart twisting. Vivian exhaled. I won't punish you, Vivian said. Not for this. Keisha's eyes lifted, guarded. Miss Sterling. Vivian reached into a folder and slid it across the desk. A formal document, a job offer. International Partnerships, Support Japanese Liaison Interim. Keisha's breath caught. Vivian's voice stayed steady. Effective immediately. Higher pay, predictable hours, full benefits. Keisha stared as if the paper might vanish if she touched it. Amina squeezed her mother's sleeve, whispering, Mom, look. Keisha's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink away. But Keisha started. Vivian's gaze turned to ice. Marla has been reassigned. Pending investigation. Keisha's mouth opened slightly. Amina whispered, stunned. You can do that. Vivian looked at her. Yes, she said, and I should have done it sooner. Keisha's voice cracked. Why are you helping us? Vivian paused. Then she said something honest. Because your daughter walked into my meeting room and saved months of work, Vivian said. And because no company deserves loyalty from people it refuses to see. Keisha looked down at the offer. Her fingers hovered over the page. Then she touched it, like touching proof. Amina watched her mother's face change. Not suddenly, not magically, but slowly, like dawn, like someone stepping out of a shadow. Keisha whispered, thank you. Vivian nodded once. You earned it. Amina's chest filled with something hot and fierce. A victory that didn't feel like stealing. A victory that felt like truth finally finding its seat at the table. A week later, the executive floor looked different to Amina. Not because the carpet changed. Not because the art suddenly made sense. It looked different because she no longer felt like she was trespassing. Keisha walked beside her, not in a facilities uniform but in a simple blouse and blazer. Vivian's assistant had helped her choose. Keisha's badge was new. It didn't say facilities. It said International Partnerships. Amina stared at the badge the entire elevator ride like it was a miracle with a barcode. When the doors opened on the executive floor, Keisha stepped out first. Her shoulders were straighter, her head higher. Not because she was pretending, because she didn't have to shrink anymore. They walked down the hall. People passed, and for the first time people looked at Keisha. Some with surprise, some with curiosity, some with the kind of respect that should have been there from the beginning. Amina held her mother's hand and felt the difference in the grip, less tense, less braced for impact. They reached the supply closet where Keisha's old cart used to sit. The cart wasn't there anymore. In its place was a clean, empty space. Keisha paused. Her eyes drifted to a small hook on the wall, where a mop bucket tag used to hang, a bright blue plastic rectangle with a number. Keisha reached into her bag and pulled out the blue tag. She'd kept it, not as shame, as evidence, as a reminder of what she survived. Amina tilted her head. Why do you still have it? Keisha smiled softly. Because it reminds me of where I started. Amina frowned. But it also reminds me of how they treated you. Keisha's smile didn't fade. It hardened into something warmer. It reminds me, she said, that they were wrong. Amina looked at the tag, then up at her mom. Mom, she whispered, I thought you were hiding because you were scared. Keisha knelt so her eyes met Amina's. I was scared, she admitted, but not of them. I was scared of losing you, losing this roof, losing stability. Amina's throat tightened. I hate that you had to be scared. Keisha brushed her thumb across Amina's cheek. Me too. A pause. Then Keisha added, but you did something brave. Amina shrugged, trying to pretend she didn't care. I just said I could help. Keisha smiled. Sometimes that's the bravest thing. They walked toward Vivian's office. The same door Amina had knocked on without permission, but today the door was open. Vivian stood inside, speaking with an assistant. She looked up when she saw them. Her expression softened, not into a smile exactly, but into something less cold. Amina, Vivian said. Amina stopped suddenly, nervous again. Hi. Vivian glanced at Keisha's badge, nodded once. You're on time. Keisha smiled, small but real. Yes, ma'am. Vivian's gaze returned to Amina. How's school? Amina blinked. It's okay. Vivian nodded. Good. Stay in it. Amina looked at her, then blurted, Are you still mad I walked in? Vivian's eyes flickered, and for the first time she actually smiled just a little. No, Vivian said. I'm glad you did. Amina swallowed. Marla. Is she coming back? Vivian's face turned serious again. No. Amina waited, breath held. Vivian continued, calm and final. People who use power to crush others don't belong here. Amina felt something inside her settle, like the building had finally spoken her language. Keisha reached for Amina's hand, squeezing gently. They turned to leave. As they walked down the hallway, Amina looked back one last time at the conference room door. The room where she'd been laughed at. The room where she'd stood in a hoodie and scuffed shoes and said, I can help. The room where adults had learned that skill and worth don't always wear suits. Amina tightened her grip on her mother's hand and walked forward. Not lost, not invisible, just small and seen. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever been underestimated because of where you started, what you look like, or what you couldn't afford, leave a comment with one sentence you wish someone had told you back then. Because sometimes the world changes. The moment one small voice finally says, I can help.